Americas, Your Eminence, Metropolitan of Orthodox Church in Germany, Switzerland, Eminence, Metropolitan, dear Honorable Representative of the German Catholic Bishop Conference in Germany, my dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be here for the interpretation of common history of Christians and Muslims and Jews in Turkey, and to talk very shortly on the problems of minorities. As well known, the Turks are a group, an ethnic group, a nation who migrated from Central Asia, today's Transoxiana, Turkmenistan, just on the mid of 11th century, too late, by the way of Iran to Anatolia, Mikrasia. And it's a fact, the Islamization of Turkic groups are not as early as many of people would imagine. For example, I have a German school book, Musisches Encyclopedia, Lexicon, and I should say quite well written, but full of dramatic mistakes. The one is that, for example, he mentions the name of Firdowsi, the famous Iranian poet, saying that as the Turks conquered Iran in 1653 and Islamized this country, full of imagination, of course, in 653, the number of Muslims in Turkic group, in Turkish community in that age was less than the graduates of Harvard, maybe, of today. So the history of Islamization of the Turks are quite unknown. And the first Muslim Turkish state is founded at the end of 10th century, 11th century, just on the banks of today's China, Eastern Turkestan, Xinjiang. This is the oldest Turkic Muslim state, and it became a long time till some of the Turks getting Islamized, even in 18th century on the Caucasus. Some of the Turkic dialects have a large vocabulary about pig, ham. That means, they used to eat it very well, till 18th century, when they had to convert, become the Muslim religion. And it's also a fact, we talk about the Muslim Turkey, which is right, there is also a good group of Turks, which are called Gagavuz in Bulgaria, in Romania, Republic of Moldova, and Ukraine. These are Turkish-speaking Christians, Orthodox. Forget about the large group of Karamanlis. After the project of Venizelos, we had a population exchange in 20s, and around 200,000 people, the Turkish-speaking Christians, had to leave the country, moving to Greece. And after that, their life was not so easy because Greek language was at all unknown for them. It took time that they could integrate themselves to this society. So the Orthodoxia is not an unknown compartment for Turkish society. Moving to this country at the beginning of 13th century, in 1200s, the Turks occupied and conquered the country. Everywhere, Turkish language became a lingua franca, and the country has been called by Italians, not by the Turk himself, as Turkey or Turkmenia. For Muslim Turks, this country was the country of Roman Empire. That was their aim. They pretended to be inheritors of Roman Empire here. By the way, of course, we have to forget the name of Byzance for a while, because this empire and this civilization is called Rome. Romans and Roman administration and Roman civilization. It's just the Christian conversion of the classical empire, inherited later by Turks, Muslim Turks. It's a quite late change, very late change in the ethnogenesis of a country, the latest one. To that time, European part of the world already had been conquered by many Germanic groups, converted into Christianity starting in 5th, 6th centuries. The 6th century is the national identity, already fulfilled the national identity of France and later German territories, and even Hungary and Poland. In that late age, of course, the policy of the Turkish state in converting the country into Islam is quite interesting. Anatolia was the country of Christians in different sects. The first one is, of course, the Roman Orthodox Church, many church. The second one is, of course, is a jargon monophysistic church, monophysite church of Armenia in Syria, and then, of course, Nestorians. The rest of them had been in today's Hakkari and disappeared after 1960s. And meanwhile, starting with the conversion to Islam, upper Mesopotamian parts were the split towns of new religion. It was the policy of the Turks called istimalat. Before the military conquest, the Turks always tried to convert some parts of the candidate countries, and they had some kinds of agreements with churches and monasteries, giving them some concessions. This is not an opportunism of the church, as many people would say, where you had no authority, worldly authority, and the chaos and the threat of the new conquest. The church had to organize peace and give life guarantee to their subjects. That was one of the reasons. And it's, of course, the new administration of the Turks. Just after the war of Indore-Leon, the victorious Selçuklu Turkish Sultan was congratulated by Armenian Patriarch. And the answer of the Selçuklu Sultan to Armenian Patriarch was that by the wish and by the miracle of your prayings and goodwills, your eminence. That was a kind of symbiosis between different, between different groups of Christians and Muslim administration. It's certainly a new phase of that. Gennadius Scholarius, a very distinguished scholar of his century, who had been the eminent representative of anti-West, anti-Catholic people, and supported by the Sultan Mehmed II. Certainly, it was the beginning of a new era. Orthodox bishop is appointed, not only recognized by the head of, spiritual head of the community, but appointed as the head of these Christian communities, etnarch, Reshkaluta in the classical Iranian times. In Iranian Empire, in Sassanid Empire, the head of the Jewish community has been called as Reshkaluta. This is only just a translation of etnarchon in this empire. The etnarch was not only the head of the Hellenic-speaking people, but also lots of Slavs, Slovenic peoples, and even Christian Arabs in this area. He was not only the spiritual head of the community, he was the supreme authority of financial affairs, tax collection, supreme authority of judicial affairs, and supreme authority of educational affairs and censorship. For a while, that means Hellenism could survive brilliantly till 19th century. Anyone on the Balkans belonging either to Bulgarian compartment or Macedonian or Serbian or another group or Albanian, he had been deeply influenced by Hellenic education. It was only in 19th century that first of all the Bulgarian mecenes, sponsors, started with national education like Konstantin Fotinov and spread out to Bulgarian schools everywhere, admired not only by his own people, even by the Turks as a successive educational reformer. It was the time of the nationalism in the church, only in 19th century. After the national revolt of Greeks, everyone in the empire was in search of his own independence and national revival. These were the Armenians, these were the Bulgarians, and these were the Serbians. Very simple cheta and committee activities turned into very difficult church affairs. The Balkan Slavs confronted in 19th century with a new movement, Macedonian and Bulgarian Catholic Church. In that matter, Ottoman Empire, together with Russia, at first was against this type of Catholicization. But by the will of Western Entente, they had to accept it. Certainly, this was not a very general and very impressive element in the history of Balkan peoples, but for a while changed the situation and the structure of ecumenic church. Here we have a problem, whether the church has carried the title of ecumenical. For me and for us at all, for the intellectual, this is at all a nonsense. The name and the title of one's own church is not interesting for us. Whether they use this title or that title should and may not be a subject for our own discussions. But let me give you an example. Under Mehmet II, the church is named as Roman Orthodox Church. We know what Orthodox is, and I think we don't know what Rome is. Rome. Roma est impera orbit universum. Means, Rome means oikumenon, ecumenic, universum. If we talk about Roman Empire and Roman nation, that's already anyway, I mean, means ecumenical and universal. So if we mention the name as Rum Orthodox, that's not a wrong translation, Greek Orthodox. Of course, basically they are Greeks maybe, and the liturgy is in Greek language. And the language of the clergy is also Greek, as you know. The Greek is also the second language after Aramaic and Hebrew in the Christian world, no doubt about it. But Rome doesn't mean one of them. Rome is the universal existence of many people. So if we use Rome Orthodox Kilisesi, Roman Orthodox Church, that means the universal ecumenic church of today. The discussion among the Christian partners is none of our business. Fener is the name of the neighborhood. It's on the periphery. Certainly, they started to use this neighborhood at the end of 16th century. Till that time, they have changed twice the place of the Patriarchate in Istanbul. The first one should be, of course, Hagia Sophia, the environment. And I should tell you that we have discovered this place. The last discoveries, I mean, whenever I have been the director in Topkapi, the archaeological discoveries shows us the place between Aya Irini and Hagia Sophia is not a locament of the pilgrimage, but it is the palace of the Archbishop and Patriarch. So that was the first place, that had to be the first place. And second one should be, of course, today's place of Fatih, Mosque Fatih Cami. And just at the end of 16th century, by the intrigues of Safiye Sultan, they changed it again to Fener. Fener is the periphery and not original and native place for the Patriarchate of Ecumenic Church. And it was, of course, the structure of the Patriarchate. First of all, they had their Holy Synod, and they had, of course, their bureaucracy. Supreme authorities of this lay bureaucracy are called Logophet. Logophet Bey is a typical representative of the bureaucracy, Greek bureaucracy, and it had been, even appointed as the member of Ottoman Senate, Meclis-i Ayan, in 19th century. Now, we pay attention. The Ottoman Parliament, Chambre des Députés, is abolished by Sultan Abdülhamid II, but not the Senate. The Senate and their members stayed there in times eternal, till the end of the empire. And Logophet of the Patriarchate was a long-living man. They usually appointed for lifetime and never died. This second part of that, the schools were under the supervision and instruction and investigation of the Patriarchate. However, this caused troubles in 19th century on the eve of emerging nationalism. The third one, Patriarchate was the tax collector of the community, which they kept till the reforms of Tanzimat in 19th century. And last not least, the Patriarch and the bishops, that means the metropolits in every province, had been the head of the non-Muslim community. Again, not only the head of the Orthodox community, the head of the non-Muslim community, including Armenians and Syriacs. The Protestants are recognized very late. Only after 1850s, by the intrigues of Lord Stratford Canning, the powerful ambassador of Britain, every people got his status as millet. And that was the cause why the Greek metropolis lost their power in some of the provinces, not everywhere. In provinces where they had been in minority, like Upper Mesopotamian and Syrian provinces, but not on Balkans and in Anatolia. It's a fact that the three are created by Mehmet II. Mehmet II says to the Hovakim, the Metropolitan of Prusa, now you become the ethnarch and the patriarch of the Armenian nation in Istanbul. He says, well, we have someone, a supreme head in Achmiazin in Armenia. That's none of our business. That can be your spiritual leader. But you are the leader, administrative head, cultural head, and supreme judge of the Armenian nation. Even he is your subject. That's very important. So the ethnarch had the authority to use the Ottoman police and security forces. Therefore, we may not talk about a secularism or a laicism in classical Ottoman Empire. People stood under the jurisdictional authority of the Patriarchate. This period of Roman law is called Turkocratia, using the codification of Justinianus and using the codification of Isaurians in 8th century. Patriarchate took its jurisdictional authority, especially in civil affairs, till the end of the monarchy, till the proclamation of and adoption of the Turkish Civil Code from Switzerland. The last one, again, it's a fact that the Greek authority, Greek Patriarchate, stood as the supreme authority for any kind of Christian on the Balkans. For Balkan minds, taking the famous dictionary of Pope Daniel, a Vlach man, a Vlach priest, he says, in order to become a good Christian, my brother, you have to learn this language. The language, the Greek language, was the language of Orthodox believers. So it means in this empire, Turk and Turkification means Islam, Muslim, and Hellenic language, and Hellenization means Orthodoxia and Christianity. That was a special privilege of the time. Certainly, the times had been changed with the emergence of nationalism, with the conflict among Christians and the laws of the countries. Even on the mid of 19th century, Turkish Empire had a very large Christian group. All the schools gave their contingent, 35%, to Christian children, Christian and Jewish children. Medical school, engineering school, imperial school like Galatasaray, and my own school, Imperial School of Administrative Sciences, Mektebi Mülkiye, had a special contingent that's around 35% for non-Muslim Christians and Jews. And the Greeks had the supreme and primary priority in this number, in this contingent. But after the Congress of Berlin, this number has been reduced. And after Balkan Wars, at all. So now we have new problems, a new era. Let me talk about it very quickly. Today, we have problems with Vakuf property, the immobiles and the similar properties of the churches. For that, it's inevitable, and we need an immediate reform for bringing, issuing the legal person moral, legal personality. Before that, no one would able to solve the problem. We may not to talk about mutual countermeasures. Whatever they do in Western trust is their own culpa. For the culpa of a Balkan republic, we cannot follow the same route. Against the culpa of a Balkan republic, we cannot follow the same pattern because we are the inheritors of a world empire. That's the last Rome. And we had the institution of this Roman Empire. We had to keep our traditional way. For that, we don't need the instructions of European community either. European community, after my mind and after the mind of some people, should not be the goal of Turkish society. There are economic problems, there are some other problems for which maybe we have to keep ourselves away from European community. But the patterns of democracy and the traditional ways of keeping the Christian communities in this country, in this state, is our traditional way. There is also another problem of education. All the restrictions and strictions, had to be solved. There are very, very tragic comic features of that. They have a school only with 10 pupils. They have a primary school only with 2 pupils and a dozen of teachers. And some of them had been closed down because of their scarcity in number. That has to be changed. The paragraphs of Lausanne Treaty cannot be inconvenience. But like all treaties, Lausanne has also can be changed on the eve of the history. As we have changed in Lausanne Treaty, many paragraphs like Montreux, depending, for example, to the regime of the Straits, Dardanelles and Bosphorus. There are, of course, lots of ancient monuments who had to stay under the property of the churches. The church has lost him, so we need a restoration under the supervision of Ministry of Culture. And in order to protect it, we can build, for example, supreme councils consisting of members of the church and Ministry of Culture, and then I'm in control whether the community keeps it well. The Tur Abidin and Midyat have lots of troubles, for example, and that should be a new examples for this regime. The regime of Imbros and Tenedos, maybe, a new statute is necessary because the agricultural wealth of these 2 islands has been in recession in the last years because of that. Coming to the problem of Hagia Sophia and Halki. Hagia Sophia is an architectural monument of the humanity. The whole architecture has less to do what we call Christian art, it's Roman art. The 2 masters of Hagia Sophia, especially Anthemios of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus, had a large knowledge about ancient engineers The books have been taken from the Library of Alexandria, and they even give the summary of these lost books. So certainly the church had some troubles, and twice, one in 6th century, the other one in 16th century, some destructive problems. And the last one is architect Sinan, who restaurated it and was very proud of it. The small mosque on the shore of Bosphorus in Tophane, Kılıç Ali Pasha, erected for admiral of the Ottoman fleet, is a very small model of new Hagia Sophia with supportive elements. So Sinan was very proud of it. It's a very humanistic and progressive decision of Kemal Atatürk. He had a Council of Ministers in 4th of November 1934. Next year, we have to commemorate the 18th anniversary of this decision. Hagia Sophia, after being 900 years the church and 500 years as the mosque, #1 mosque of Islamic world, had been changed, converted into museum. And this is the only example. For example, the mosque in Kurtuba could not enjoy this status. So we have to keep it. And it's the task of the Turkey and Turks to keep it on that way. Any kind of political propaganda, any kind of political projects are not well accepted. I'm sure that would be the way of Turkey to keep the status of Kemalist government and republic for Hagia Sophia. The second one is Halki. As far as I see, the information about Halki is sometimes has some interesting lacunes. The first one, the Turkey, did not close down this seminar with a special aim. I tell you, the Constitution of '61 clearly proclaimed it, that universities can be founded only by state universities. So some of the cunning people, quite Micrasiatic Cunnington, they would say, oh, well, we don't establish universities, just high schools, you know, high school for architecture, high school for pharmaceutica, high school for journalistic, etc. And these schools were extremely, of course, in sub-quality. And the Constitutional Court, after applications, decided to close them down, this type of private high schools. And among them on the list was, of course, Halki too. I'm sure the judges of Supreme Court had no idea about that, and I don't know whether they proved the material very well. They closed it. Now, after that, everyone became the hero. They say never again. No, we don't know that. Halki has some problems. Let me give 2 minutes only to talk about it. Years ago, as I met, in a conference in Istanbul, the Honorable Metropolitan of Panama. There he spoke about it. The Roman Catholic Church, it's none of my business, just observation. The Roman Catholic Church in America, South America, neglects the relations to the people. Then some Dominicans who had been accused of being leftist had been, kept away. And the communities in South America looking for private visits, private talks with their clergy. If they cannot have that, they could find it by Orthodox one. So there was a tendency in South America, even today, that they convert into Orthodox Church in large quantities. Now I asked him, to Metropolitan, how do you get, the new priests, clergy, for these people from Greece? No, it's impossible. We don't have as much. So I take the youngsters, young members of Latin American communities, and sent them where? To Saloniki. That I find quite irrational from our point. Halki should be a good place for this type of people from Africa, from South America, from Germany, who would study in Istanbul and take their education and Weltanschauung in this wonderful town. So the Halki seminar, the reopening of Halki seminar has an extreme importance for us, and I think the government tries to correct the old decision. The population of the Orthodox Christians in whole of the Levantine areas in Eastern Mediterranean is diminishing. In Alexandria, in Istanbul, in some parts of Egypt, and in Palestine, and in Lebanon, and in Syria. That's certainly a tendency. The last one was in 1963. And I'm sure after coming closer to European community, Turkey will rehabilitate the old position. And very few, but increasing day by day, some of the Christian neighbors of Istanbul are returning to their old town. There are, of course, some problems. You turn your country and your regime from a universal empire into a national republic. There you have more or less some problems. But I would say non-Muslims are not a serious problem. Anyone who gets it as a very serious problem and hesitates to make some rehabilitations, to bring some rehabilitations, and to correct the situation, has not a good mind, nor a knowledge in history and geography. Turks use the word minority for everyone today. But in sociology, there are minorities, as we have that among Christians and Jews. Even them, we have now many, many Gagauz, Turkish Christians, after the labor migration from Balkans. Then there are some other groups which are described as minorities wrong. For that, we have to use a German word, Volksgruppen. Volksgruppe is against something else sociologically. And we should make a distinction here and talk on that way. The solution of this problem, minorities in Istanbul, their education, their properties and immobiles, the restriction and restoration of the churches are not a huge problem. The best examples had been given. In last decades, the intellectuals of Turkey are interested more and more in this problem. And even the mecenes. I would mention here the role of, for example, Rahmi Koç in Ayvalık. He started with the restoration of 2 churches, and even the last one is the Metropolitan Church of Kidonia, Ayvalık. And I think that would be enough. The general director of Vakıf's properties had started with this restoration, then stopped, and Rahmi Bey goes by his own sponsors for that. That's another fact, for example, can be given as examples.